Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Grumman Pilots YouTube channel. And we're used to seeing wires in bundles like this, and you'll notice there's little black lettering on each of those wires. Well, how do you decode those letters in your DC power system, and if you have an AC power system, how do you decode those wire numbers? Well, let's take a look at them. And there are all kinds of diagrams. Like here you can see one at the very top, 51 PC1, and we're going to talk about what all those are. So stay tuned while we decode. So we would like to ask you, please subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notify to stay current with our content. Now, since we're talking about wires, let's make sure you're using the correct illegal wire in your system. And here's some aircraft spruce. You want to make sure you have the right mil-spec number on that wire. And then here's a wiring diagram. And as you can see, the ones in red are number 2 cables. And you can read the numbers right there, like 51PA2 and 51PA1, which was in blue because it's not shown in the diagram right there. But anyway, those are the numbers that are all right there in those diagrams, and they tell you a lot of information about that wire. Now, when you take a wire out of a wire bundle and you get a number, you can decode that number. First off, if it's a dual use, you'll have a D, but then you'll have the circuit it's on, the 2-letter identifier identifying the electrical load circuit that it's on, and then finally you'll have a model number for the aircraft, and you'll have a position that you're in. So again, not complicated to see. So we can see that 51 KA3, well, the KA is going to tell us in a minute that that is assigned to the starter. But what it doesn't tell you is what is the length of your wire? What are the connectors that are on that wire? And what is the gauge of the wire? Is it number 2 gauge wire, which is your main battery, your main terminal, ground, or your starter cable? Then you have the number 4 cable that runs to the alternator. Then you have the number 4 wire that runs all the way into the engine and into the cabin. And then you have the number 6 wire that feeds the bus. So again, it doesn't tell you what color the wire is. It doesn't tell you the gauge of the wire or the connectors on the wire, but it tells you pretty much everything else that it does. Now, when you're decoding a particular circuit, you may notice the numbers like 5DA1. Then you might have a 51DA1, and there's a difference between that. Now, you can look at all these numberings, and we're going to have a chart here in a minute. It does not use all the letters of the alphabet. So some of the letters are missing, some are not used, and some are unassigned. But what the nice thing is that when you look at that numbering system, such as if you have a wire that says 51XX some number, well, that 5 and that 1 tell you that that wire is found on both the 5 series and the 1 series. So you have it in the 2 place and the 4 place, the AA5s and the AA1. So if a wire starts out with 5-1, it's on both aircraft. So you'll find it in both maintenance manuals. If it's just a 5 or it's just a 1, that pretty well tells you whether it goes to the 4-place airplanes or whether it goes to a 2-place airplane. So that's what the first numbering does. I don't believe that we have any D's on our numbering, but once you have that list, here's the complete list. So you can see that everything's in there, like F, flight instrument, E, an engine instrument, L for lighting, K for the engine, and then the particular circuit for power for the starter was the KA circuit. So there's a lot in there. And then also too, there's some other information you might want to look at in the maintenance manuals that can make your job a lot easier when it comes to determining what these wires do. And then here's one of the most interesting slides talking about the wires, that it says that when color coding is employed, here's what you need to do. And so there for each of the functions, there's the color that will go with it. So that if you see colored wires in our airplane, and again, we're used to seeing the white Tefsnell wire, Teflon coated, copper coated wire that we use all the time in our systems, and it's usually white with a Teflon coating on it, but it is available in other colors. Even the big number 2, 4, and 6 cables are available in a wide variety of solid colors as well as stripes. Now, when we look at a diagram like this, and this is our DC power system, we want to make sure we're using the right wire for the system. Now, aircraft wire is not the same as battery cable. It's not the same as welding cable. Now, welding cable has more strands and can carry a higher load, but the jacket is rubber and it's not suitable for an aircraft. As a matter of fact, they're using Teflon on wire now because the PVC they used to use, when it burns, it creates toxic fumes, and the military and most of the commercial airlines aren't using it anymore. So that's why they've gone to the Teflon wire. Now, a fun, interesting read in the maintenance manual is right here, the loading for each of the circuits in your aircraft. And I'm talking whether it's your alternator, whether it's your lighting, it's your stall warning horn, it's your pitot tube. Well, for each of those circuits, it gives you the load and the number of amps that go through that circuit so that you can better plan your fuse systems and your wire that goes along with that. So that was quite a bit of information to digest on the wiring, and it'll be easy to do when you start working on the airplane. But again, you want to take those wires and you want to change them all out. And while you're there, you're probably going to want to change out the relays and the other stuff. So it's not a hard job to use. And clocking of the connectors on the wire can be a bit problematic, but with hydraulic presses, and there's nothing complicated about making these wires. You can go buy the connectors and you can buy the wedgers that you use with a hammer to drive them down. But while you have it all apart, take it all, get it all clean, and get all the connectors on there. And the nice thing about doing it with the new wires and the new connectors and the new relays and the new hardware is how much faster your engine will turn over, because you're not losing any of the voltage with resistance in the wires and in the relays. So it can make a big difference. And so if you're having a problem cranking your aircraft, you might want to look at the connectors first, and then maybe the cables, and then finally get to the relays. So anyway, that's a lot to take in for working on your airplane, but as long as you've gone this far, you might as well go a little farther and do a top-notch job. So not only is the new wire and the new connectors and relays going to work really well, but there's a number of ways that you can make those cables up, and we're going with the Jimmy Candeletti AGAC style that Hortman Aviation used to use. So when you make up a cable, you get some of that braided loom, and it goes over the cable. And now you put the connector on, and when you put the heat shrink tubing on to seal the end so water and moisture can't get in there to cause corrosion problems, which will cause more resistance in your cables, while you're using that heat shrink, it also holds that mesh sleeving on the outside. It gives you a good abrasion factor on the outside of the cable to protect it when it's used in the engine compartment, and it's vented and meshed like that so it can let the heat out if the cable should get warm. So that's another feature of when you make a cable. There's more than one way to make a cable. There is no correct way, but there are many wrong ways to do it. Forget buying expensive toys for your kittens and cats. We find that just taking the aircraft spruce box and the paper on the tile floor is more than enough amusement for them for hours.